Hi everyone, so today we're going to start by looking at criminal psychology, and the first lesson we're going to be looking at is biological theories of criminal psychology for Edexcel A2 spec. So for your exam, you need to be able to describe and evaluate biological explanations of criminal behavior, and there isn't just one explanation, there are a number of biological explanations that we're going to go through. For example, brain injury, amygdala, the XYY syndrome, and also personality theory, which does fall under the biological explanations. So there's obviously so many different causes for criminal behavior. So you may just want to pause at this point and just make a note of all the different causes that you think might explain a criminal's behavior. So these could be obviously biological, they could be social, and psychological. So we're going to start having a look at brain injury as an explanation of criminal behaviour. So the majority of research does suggest that there is some sort of an association or link between brain injury and criminal offending, because a lot of criminal offenders do have some sort of an injury to the head. What we mean by brain injury here is brain injury can occur for a number of reasons, such as having a fall accident, us being involved in assault, alcohol damage, and drug abuse can also severely damage parts of the brain. So recent research that has been carried out on brain damage inflicted on specific areas of the brain has shown that there is obviously serious antisocial behaviour consequences. In year 2000, the Institute of Child Health conducted a study on two young boys that had been involved in an accident causing brain damage in the ventral region of the frontal lobes, which is right at the forefront of the brain. And the findings of this study show that the boys were unable to control their anger and their violent, impulsive behaviours. So again, there's a study there that suggests that there is definitely a link between brain injury and aggressive behaviour. Acquired brain injuries, or ABIs, can affect a person's cognitive functions as well, such as impulse control, as I was talking earlier. Different parts of the brain are responsible for different skills, okay, which is called brain localization. Therefore, depending on which part of the brain is damaged, the effects obviously are going to be more specific. In year 2012, Williams analysed data from 196 inmates or prisoners from UK prison, and what they found was that 60% of those young offenders did actually report having suffered a head or brain injury at some point. And they also found that this did affect their social judgment, their temperance, and even control impulses, which all do sort of contribute to criminal behaviour as well. Moreover, this group of offenders also tended to be younger at the time of their first offence, showing high rates of reoffending. So, in other words, those that had some sort of a brain injury when they were younger tended to be offending at younger ages. Evaluation of the research on brain injury and obviously the link between criminal behaviour. A range of studies here. Kreutzer 1991 were unable to prove or disprove a causal relationship between traumatic brain injury and violence, and the research is still a little bit inconclusive. So this sort of goes against the explanation, because Kreutzer obviously found that there was no definite link between brain injury and criminal behaviour. Sina Faisal et al. 2011 analysed data from Sweden, and they found a relationship between traumatic brain injury and convictions for violent crime. And those crimes included things like a murder, sexual offence, robberies, and assault. And of those that had an acquired brain injury, 8.8% had committed a violent crime, compared to only 3% in the matched control group. So again, this study is evidence, because it does show that there is a link between those that had gone through brain trauma, brain injury, and violent crime. When reviewing the research on brain injury, other comorbid conditions should also be considered. For example, many offenders also have history of drug abuse and other personality disorders, pre-existing personality disorders. Both of these are known to increase criminal behavior. So there could really be a number of factors involved. So this last point is really a weakness, because what it's saying is that there are other factors that could also be affecting criminal behavior and not just brain injury. The amygdala. So the amygdala is a very important part of the brain, which does control a lot of behaviors and emotions. And damage to the amygdala, or any type of abnormality within the amygdala, which can be caused by a stroke or even the growth of a tumor, this can lead to a person's emotions being affected and almost making them unemotional. So they won't experience any type of emotion. So damage to the amygdala can result in reacting in overly fearful ways or not reacting at all. So it's one extreme to the next. Either, it can affect your emotions in that you are showing too much fear or not reacting at all. And this is caused by the amygdala really misrepresenting information from the senses, and then obviously responding incorrectly with aggressive or impulsive behaviors. Research in both humans and animals have shown that when the amygdala part of the brain is stimulated, it can in fact result in aggressive behaviors. And there is a number of animal studies that have been carried out which have shown that there's definitely a link between the stimulation of the amygdala and aggressive behavior. Furthermore, brain scans is obviously a scientific research method that has been used to look at parts of the brain. So brain scans have found that amygdala in psychopaths are much smaller than those of non-psychopaths. So that's quite interesting, because obviously, the amygdala, the size of the amygdala could also play an important role in this. A study carried out by Pardini in 2014 conducted neuroimaging scans. So again, brain scans were used on a group of 26-year-old men. They were obviously divided up into two groups based on the size of their amygdala. 3 years later, in a follow-up study, they found that the group, which obviously had a reduced amygdala size volume, were 3 times more likely to be aggressive and violent, showing obviously psychopathic behaviors than the other group. So that's quite important. Even the size of the amygdala can play a part and could affect criminal behavior as well. Shamrage. So Shamrage is a term that's really used to describe an emotional state, and it's mostly linked with animals. So obviously a lot of research has been carried out on animals, where they've removed neural connections to the cortex of cats and several other different types of animals. And when they are provoked, they do show emotional behavior, which is obviously associated with aggression and rage. And a lot of the research is linked to the amygdala, where the amygdala in that animal is obviously stimulated, and it always results in aggressive or hostile behavior. So it's not just application to humans here. We are obviously using animals which do have similar, obviously, brain structures to humans as well. So we can sort of apply the research from animals to humans as well. A Rain et al. Study, you may have come across this one at AS Psychology in the biological approach, as it was a classic study. So this can be used again here for support. Rain et al. 97 looked at 41 murderers and then obviously compared them with 41 non-murderers that pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity. They used a positron emission tomography scan, a PET scan, in the brains, which showed that they had lower levels of activity. The murderers had lower levels of activity in their prefrontal cortex. So remember, the prefrontal cortex is at the front of the brain, and that is responsible for controlling your own behaviour and your own impulsive behaviours. They also found abnormal functioning in the amygdala, which again can be linked to previous research that has been carried out on amygdala and the link between criminal behaviour. So there's obviously a lot of research that's been carried out on the role of the amygdala. So some evaluations here. The size of the amygdala does not always link to a psychopath. An example here is James Fallon, 2006, was able to identify a psychopathic brain, but he too made many errors. So that's not to say that, we can look at the pictures of people's brains and then identify who's going to be a criminal. That's absolutely not the case. Furthermore, Shamrage studies, which talked about in terms of animals, can be criticised because animals, yes, at the same time, they are similar, but they're also different. So again, we can't really generalise the results of animals to explain human criminal behaviour. Brain structure is not the only explanation for all criminal behaviour. There's many other factors such as personality, which we're going to have a look at, and also social explanations, which we'll have a look at in the next few lessons. Research has also found amygdala is not the only part of the brain that's linked to aggression. And this is a weakness really because majority of research has focused on amygdala, but other researchers have started to find different parts such as the orbitofrontal cortex, the OFC, and that part of the brain has also been linked or associated with aggression and a loss of control of behaviour. The case of Phineas Gage, again, you might have come across in cognitive psychology, where a steel rod was fired through Phineas Gage's brain, showing damage. The frontal lobe again was damaged. And what happened in this case was Phineas Gage did suffer from obviously memory impairment, and personality obviously changed as well from a calm person to, a bit more aggressive and quick-tempered. So again, the frontal part of the brain is very important and can be linked to, control and impulsive behaviors. So that last point there is a strength. The XYY syndrome. So all of these people are obviously criminals, real life criminals. And what was different about these guys was that they had something called the XYY syndrome, which is an extra Y chromosome, which we're going to have a look at next. So the XYY syndrome is a genetic condition which occurs when male genes have an extra Y chromosome. So females obviously typically have the XX and males have an XY chromosome combination. However, in this XYY genetic condition, males have an extra Y chromosome. And it's not a very common condition. So, for example, 1 in 10,000 males are actually born with this genetic condition. And they have been seen to show behavioral and also physical differences, such as being a lot taller. We're also having lower intelligence, low IQ scores, impulsivity as well. Early studies of XYY syndrome have shown that this condition was 10 times more likely to be found in criminal populations. So obviously people that were in prisons. XYY syndrome has also been thought to make men overly aggressive. So obviously the Y chromosome that males have makes them more aggressive because of testosterone. So if we've got an extra Y, another Y, then obviously it's going to make somebody more overly aggressive. Also lacking empathy, leading to something called a super male syndrome. It's sometimes known as that. In 1965, Jacobs carried out a study and found that men with XYY chromosome were actually overrepresented in prisons. So whereas it's 1 in 10,000 a prevalence of this syndrome, in prisons it was 15 per 10,000 compared to the general population, which is obviously a big increase there. So it's obviously more common, more prevalent, seen more in prisons. So the research on XYY and the evidence, determining the rate of XYY in a criminal population does require a lot of time and skilled staff, and it is resource intensive because in other words, it takes a lot of time and it's time consuming. So it's not really a practical way to look at genetics of all male offenders, to really work out if they have XYY. Another study, Thielgaard's study, found a small presence of XYY men amongst criminal population. And this obviously suggests that it can't just be the only reason for criminal behaviour, and there must also be other factors that do contribute to criminality as well. Otherwise, we would expect XYY to be in 100% criminals, but obviously not all criminals have that chromosome or syndrome. A weakness also is that women also engage in criminal behaviour, including violent crime. So how is it that women's behaviour can be explained? Because women obviously do not have an extra Y chromosome or XYY. This explanation does fail to account for or explain criminal behaviour amongst women. In 2015, Laura Ray and Jutta Berkoff carried out a meta-analysis. So a meta-analysis is where they look in detail and analyse a range of research studies carried out. And what they found was, by looking at a range of journal articles, they found that there was no definite link between XYY and criminal behaviour. So again, it's possible that there could be other factors such as social factors that could be affecting a person's behaviour. So next we've got a personality, which does actually fall under biological theory, because there is obviously some biology behind personality theories relating to the brain. So personality theory was proposed by Eysenck, and he generally believes that people can be classified into 6 different personality types. So he developed the EPI, the Eysenck Personality Inventory, and he wanted to measure these 6 sort of traits. So we've got introversion, extroversion, emotional stability versus neuroticism, which means emotional instability, and then psychoticism traits. So let's have a first look at extroversion and introversion dimension of personality. So extroverts are generally people that are quite sociable. They're quite outgoing. They like excitement. They can become bored very easily, so they tend to be quite carefree, like to have adventures, quite impulsive, optimistic people. On the other hand, introverts tend to be reserved, quite reflected, sort of a bit more quieter, not so outgoing. So Eysenck used the arousal theory to explain the causal roots of the 3 personality dimensions. Extroversion can be explained in terms of cortical arousal through a part of the brain called the ascending reticular system, or the ARAS, within the brain. So what it's basically saying is introverts have a higher level of arousal than extroverts. This means introverts require less stimulation to increase that arousal, so which kind of explains why introverts are less outgoing and take less risks, because their arousal levels are already higher than extroverts. Extroverts, on the other hand, have an underactive ascending reticular system, so require a greater amount of external stimulation. This obviously explains why extroverts are more outgoing, engaging in risk-taking behaviors, because they like to experience the higher level of arousal, which obviously the introverts already have. Neuroticism and stability. So neurotic individuals tend to be quite anxious, always quite worried. Sometimes they can be quite moody, can be quite over emotional, and they find it very difficult to calm down once they do get upset and anxious. And Eysenck explained neuroticism in terms of activation in the sympathetic nervous system, particularly the limbic system. And this is responsible for the fight or flight response in danger. So neurotic individuals have greater activation levels than obviously, and a lower threshold within the limbic system, leading to impulsive and violent responses more quickly. Now, the trait of psychoticism refers to a lacking in empathy. So it's a very cold person, quite cruel, can be seen as a loner by themselves, aggressive, troublesome. And this dimension was actually added by Isaac a little bit later. It was not as part of his original model. So, as psychotic individuals lack empathy for others, they're more likely to harm others and commit crimes or murders without feeling guilt or remorse. So, although there's not much biological evidence to support this dimension, psychoticism, there has been a little bit of research which shows an increased amount of testosterone and also low MAO levels, which is an enzyme, monoamine oxidase levels. So there is some biology, but not much on psychoticism trait. So what Isaac's basically saying is all of these personality traits, somebody that's got high extroversion score, high neuroticism, and also high psychoticism is most likely to show criminal behaviors. Okay, so by carrying out an inventory, a questionnaire to work out extroversion, neuroticism, psychoticism scores, we can almost sort of work out what particular characteristics, criminal characteristics a person may have. Evaluation. So obviously a range of studies that can be used here to support and go against this personality theory. So firstly, in 1981, Rushton and Christian found that there was an association between delinquency and high scores on extroversion and psychoticism. They did not, however, find any link for neuroticism. So again, there's some support, I suppose. There's a little bit of support for it, but then it does kind of go against the theory because there's no evidence for neuroticism. Bodezek 2013 investigated prevalence of Isaac's personality traits in offenders. He wanted to see obviously how often they occur and found that high levels of extroversion did actually predict a greater probability of committing a violent or criminal behaviour. So that's again evidence support for the theory. Farrington, 1982, found very little evidence for any link between Isaac's theory and criminal behaviour. So again, this one lacks validity. It goes against the theory because Farrington found no evidence at all. Other personality models have, however, challenged Isaac's theory. For example, Digman in 1990 accepted extroversion dimension and did find, this could be relevant. But Digman added other personality characteristics such as openness, conscientiousness, agreeableness. Furthermore, in 1998, Lipsy and Derzand found that impulsivity was a more accurate predictor of criminal behaviour, more so than extroversion or other traits Isaac suggested. Rain et al. Has also carried out other research. So in 1990, they took physiological, so biological measurements from 15-year-olds of arousal levels. So they measured their arousal levels and found that those with criminal records 24 years later, so obviously a longitudinal study, they actually recorded more signs of under-arousal when they were age 15. So this really shows that there is actually a link between biological basis of personality and criminal behaviour. Although in this study, Rain did acknowledge that other factors could have been involved and it's not just down to arousal level measurements.